All right. Give it a few more minutes for our friends. I see some people joining in. Is Michael Flynn here? Janine says, Gene, sorry, Gene Elvis says, is Michael Flynn here? We got to crush him. Report first during. Yeah, Michael Flynn is on Substack and he is busy, and so are some others. If you go look at Rising News listings, and you might check politics as well. I don't really check that category as much. It's worth looking at, but yes, um, there are some disinformation specialists who have shown up on Substack. Now, the good news, I believe, is that the number's still very disproportionately towards good voices. I mean, it's at least a you know 65-35 split maybe, and that's workable. We can't. I don't think that anyone really thinks an echo chamber is going to ever be fully useful. But I think that the voices like Jim Acosta being over here to do news, Scott McFarlane left in NBC and has become independent over here, and he's done pretty good work on things like the January 6th cases as a journalist. So it's good to see him around here. I saw him on
Right, but
last
do you
night.
understand the ownership of Substack and who controls it? And is it possible it'll end up
Like the
the way
others?
like Musk? Yeah, but I'm thinking of what Musk did to Twitter.
Well, Musk, yeah, like to be able to just buy it out entirely, I can't foresee that that couldn't be done. But I think that currently the Substack owners must be happy that we're all coming along and doing what we're doing. I don't see any interference at this point, but I will say, as a 27-year web designer, web professional, I'm not just a designer, but the web professional in the helping people get all these tools in order. I don't have my mp3.com site up anymore. Do you? my
Yeah.
my MySpace page has been gone for years. So the way I started my web company 27 years ago was in fact that if someone had like Craig Unger at AOL.com, that's not as powerful as Craig at CraigUnger.com. And that was always my message from day one. Like I own ChrisSampson.com, and I know several Chris Sampsons. I'm like, I'm sorry, uh, not really, but you know, I'm not sorry for having my name.com, but I have several Chris Sampsons and they don't have that name.com. I do. And so it's a need to be able to be platform free, platform liberated, so that if it shifts, you move to the next best platform. And I think this one's going to be stable for a little while. I'm pretty confident it's good. So I'll tell you what, we got some good folks already in here. I'm going to go ahead and start kind of getting to some Q&A. Welcome to everyone for joining us tonight. Craig's been back here before with us, and Craig, I know that there's a lot of people who really like your writing and your commentary, so I'm glad that they get to see you on this platform. Before I get into questions, how's everything over there? How are you?
I'm well, thank you. And it's great to be back with you, and let's do it.
Yeah. Well, my first question, you've been covering the crazy guy in orange for a while now, and um, where are we at in this operative phase of the arc of Donald Trump?
Well, I think you can see the dementia. I mean, as it's I mean, when you see him on these prolonged, he vamps. He would just go one direction or another. He forgets words all the time. There's no coherence frequently. I mean, he will be asked about the war in Iran, and he'll start talking about the ballroom. He's always been a little like that, but it's gotten worse and worse and worse. He slurs his words. I don't think it matters really in terms of diagnosing him. He
Right.
is what he is. But it's very, very scary, and especially when you start looking at the war in Iran and how he's prosecuting it, it's just clear he doesn't know anything. He doesn't know what he is doing. I've written about. I first started writing about Iran more than 35 years ago, and the very, very first thing you learn is that Iran has a stranglehold on the Strait of Hormuz, and
Hmm.
that's where all the oil is. And that is lesson number one.
Mhm.
And I remember when I first saw him asked about it, he said nobody thought of that. Well, everyone thought of that. Everyone in the Pentagon thought of it. Everyone in the State Department and the National Security Council. What it means is he had successfully uh, sealed himself off from any expertise, so he could go forward and do whatever the hell he wanted.
Do you think it's because experts make him feel stupid? Do you think that's why he avoids really being around a real expert?
Well, they're a problem for him. They're obstacles he has to overcome. And if they bring up a very strong point, like, well, if you invade Iran, they're going to shut off the Straits of Hormuz and oil will go through the roof. He doesn't want to hear that, and he is very good at shutting out any real dialogue.
Right. Well, I know he has problems with certain types of both men and women that make him like just by mere presence, bring out his inferiority. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, especially with strong women. I remember he was petrified of Nancy
I was literally going to say
Pelosi.
men first, but then my brain goes, "What about the women?" It's so true with the women. Like you bring a strong woman around him, he's either in love with her because he can't get her, or he's intimidated by her.
Right, and men who might have once been strong. I don't know if Marco Rubio ever fit that category, but I mean, it's just amazing the flip flop he does, or Lindsey Graham does to win Trump's favor.
Right. And what do you think that with this second term, like we see these hearings that just continue. I saw some of them yesterday. The people he's putting up there, or at least his advisory staff, is throwing those names out there. Let's compare the first and second term where he literally got rid of anyone who would have said no, daddy. I mean, well, that was the daughter who said no, daddy, but everyone else may have said it differently. They said no, that's not going to work, sir. Now, like literally, we have people who can't even say who won the election trying to get nominated.
Well, in fact, if they were to say that Joe Biden won the 2020 election, that would disqualify them in Trump's eyes. And he's really gotten rid of anyone with real expertise, anyone who
Mhm.
might prove to be an obstacle. And the confirmation processes are sort of comical almost when you see someone like Sheldon Whitehouse trying to get them to say yes, Joe Biden won in 2020. That will not happen. They know there are red lines. They refuse to cross them. If they want to be in Trump's cabinet, they have to prove that they are sycophants who will do whatever he says.
Right. It's really, really absurd. I mean, I've called our program tonight the chaos engine, because that seems to be what it is. Do you think, I mean, obviously he has no bearing left except for stay out of prison. But who's benefiting right now that he's I mean, to say bull in the china shop would be kind of a minimizing thing, but like he's the Molotov cocktail in the system. Who's benefiting from this?
Well, someone benefited by betting on the price of oil. So
Ah.
obviously, you have insiders there who were able to place, I believe it was $1.5 billion worth of bets on oil going up uh,
Hmm.
within 15 minutes before he announced the invasion. It's pretty clear there's no line, there's no bottom in terms
Hmm.
of what is shameful or corrupt. He will do whatever it takes and take advantage of everything. And now he's gotten himself into a war, and I don't know he knows how to get out of it.
He has no idea how to get out of it. That part I can tell you. I did a piece for our audience. I'll say this: I did a piece a couple weeks ago after our conversation with Sean Penner, where I ran through the 13 chapters of Sun Tzu that I know pretty well, and I applied them first to George Bush. And I know that you have an extensive understanding of Bush from your book in that era. Um, and I had to reapply the 13 chapters to both Trump and Putin because both of them had applied all the failure marks that the militarist himself, 2,500 years ago warned against. But I want to hone in on a couple of them that I think matter. Um, Being prepared for a war is the number one thing. Are you prepared to do the thing you're about to take state resources? And it's not about like money and or timber. It's human lives, and the economy, your whole country's assets, and you're throwing them into this thing that has an undefined end. And Trump, Sun Tzu said of like Trump and Putin, those who can't see the victory before they start the battle are lost, essentially. And that's true of both of them. We're heading into year 5 of the full scale war here in Ukraine. For those who don't know me, I'm in Ukraine. I'm in Kiev. I've been here since January 2022. And then we're watching Trump trying to do Iraq part 2.0, and it's Iran, which is not going to work. So I want to bat this your way by asking the following. You covered the story of Iran and Reagan until now. You know it pretty well. What do you think our viewers need to really think about with the difference between what Bush did in 2002 to 2003 going into Iraq and what Donald Trump just did that every administration before him from 1980 until now did not do, but
Well,
he did.
with Trump, yeah, I've never used the word fascism before, but with Trump, I think you have to, though it's sometimes associated with ideology, and I don't think Trump has any
Right.
ideology except greed, really, and what I want it. That's his ideology. And so it's very, very scary as you look into the upcoming midterms. You know he's going to do something. I never before have I heard so much discussion from responsible people that the
Mhm.
election will be stolen. I think it's a very serious problem. We see how he's built up ICE to be almost a private military force for himself, the way the SS was for Hitler. And talking
Right.
about bringing them to the elections is very, very scary. The new laws they're trying to pass, or they're doing everything they can to suppress the vote.
Mhm.
Right now it looks like if the elections were fair and free, that the Democrats would flip a good 20 seats in the House
Mhm.
of Representatives.
Mhm.
But we have to be really scared that he's going to do something to interfere with that.
Based on Jan 6, which was my specialty, unfortunately, I predicted Jan 6, not specifically Jan 6 the date, but that those particular groups would use violence in that election, and they did, almost exactly like we said they would. How much further would he be willing to go?
Well, I mean, we've seen what ICE can do in Minneapolis, and I think that's kind of scary. I mean, it's really something. Even me, I moved outside of New York. I live on a small island called Shelter Island, but we've
Mhm.
even had ICE come out here to take gardeners and people who are
Wow.
immigrants, and it's just sort of insane. I lived in New York for more than 40 years, and I believe there's something like 4 million immigrants who are gainfully employed there. I mean, it's just a huge part of the way the city functions, and to disrupt that is nuts. But it's an ongoing battle that it isn't over yet.
And Tom Blanche is saying that he definitely implies that he wants to send more. Um, he wants to follow through like on the Bannon model. Yeah, Steve Bannon said like use ICE to harass the vote.
Right,
That's
and
not the words he used. I'm correcting the print, the mistype of his text. Harass
right.
voters is what he actually suggested. But
And Bannon said floods the zone, and that is exactly what they're doing. There are too many stories to follow them all. You can't,
right.
be a good reporter and nail down 50 stories simultaneously. But that's really what's going on here in the States.
Do you think there's a now I said that who's benefiting from it, but if you looked around some of the I'm gonna use the kind of Kremlin terms I'm used to, the cardinals, like Putin has his gray cardinal in the chamber. Who are the ones that you see influencing Trump the most, or the administration at large?
Well, Stephen Miller is the first one who comes to mind.
Hmm.
I might have said another day Steve Bannon, but he's been outside the administration for a while. But
Hmm.
Miller is very, very dark figure within the administration, especially when it comes to immigrants. People keep comparing him to Goebbels, and it's I, you
If
know, I,
if the description fits Pee Wee German, I'm okay with it.
right. So he is a huge problem. You also see two figures who are always hovering in the background, or sometimes more so, are Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. And Witkoff, I mean, it's really sort of interesting that he has such a high profile role. Allegedly trying to negotiate the end to two wars. He has no diplomatic experience whatsoever. He is a real estate developer, as is Jared Kushner is an investor and sometime real estate owner and developer. And I mean, that's not an accident that they're in Trump's chosen field.
Right.
He sees these conflicts really as real estate deals. And I'm sure with regard to Gaza, he wants to clean out the Palestinians and make it into essentially a Mediterranean resort. And they could make lots of money off of that. But I mean, the only problem is Palestinian people aren't going to get any of it. Um, and with Ukraine, he sees a simple solution of giving the eastern part of Ukraine back to Putin, and just regardless of sovereignty, little things like sovereignty are something he doesn't really care about at all.
Well, literally, as you said that, I don't know if she's one of our viewers, but I had someone just reboot or whatever you would call it on this account. My post from today, which is my boots that I've been wearing here the entire time in Ukraine, and they still have clay from Donetsk when I was in Sloviansk just a few days ago over the weekend. And when I arrived in the first year, I was in Avdiivka. So I wrote a piece earlier today about essentially um, the uh, betrayal of America through these figures to this country because no one here is going to go for this idea. It's essentially one of the things I think that's most galling is that they're so out of tune that they're basically wasting America's time too because none of it's enforceable. I mean, they can just say, well, we're not going to give any more aid, and Ukraine's already bolstering for that. Then they announced, Washington Post, I should say, announced that funds that were paid from NATO countries through the PURL or Pearl program to purchase weapons to help Ukraine. Now Trump just says, "Oh, we're going to use them to fight Iran," which is theft. If that's a purchase through a process for specific weaponry to go to another country, that money essentially still belongs to that country and/or for a product. But this is Trump. Now, Craig, you studied his business, yes? I'm pretty familiar with your books.
Yeah,
He doesn't tend to really like own up on his deals now, does he?
no, he doesn't. And I mean, it's not to belabor the obvious, but who benefits? And Russia does. And
Right.
in fact, if you look at the entire Iran war, the biggest beneficiary uh, is almost certainly Russia, because the
Right.
price of oil is going through the roof, and that helps them. And so he's coming to the United States asking for an extra $200 billion from taxpayers for the war, and meanwhile hiking the price of gas. I think if I'm correct, gives around $300 billion to Russia. So
Right.
this is just he's stealing from American taxpayers to advance the fortunes of Vladimir Putin.
Well, for our our viewers, I will say I've got several big articles exactly on these items, partially because I track the weapons and how what I'm really always concerned with is how Americans do not understand that there are districts in their state or even the district they live in that help supply the U.S. military first. Then, consequentially, gear is offset to go to Ukraine, and that what Mike Johnson did in 2024 for Trump actually harmed them. And now he's saying, well, we don't have the weapons because we gave them all to Ukraine, which is a lie. Um, then they've said that well, we have to use all these weapons to fight our war with Iraq now, but I mean with Iran, but they don't use the same weapons to fight Iran that Ukraine uses to fight Russia. It's another lie on top of another lie on top of another lie. And at some point, I think that the problem for Americans is it's like you mentioned, flood the zone, Steve Bannon, how does the average American like sort the bullshit mess? So to form that into a question for you, um, you've watched several administrations play games from Reagan through Bush. In your books, I'm gonna highlight especially, but you're free to draw the lines however you wish. Where are we at as Americans now because of this? Aside from just Trump, where are we at now that we have sacrificed our country's integrity, our security, our economy? Craig, you
Well,
got any good news?
well, I'm afraid I don't. I think we're approaching the point of no return, and people
Yeah.
really have to fight back. And just as a journalist, for me, when I got it started into journalism, there was it was a time when one big story by one reporter could make a huge difference. And I was in college when Seymour Hersh broke the My Lai massacre, and
Okay.
that changed the national consciousness in a very important way because most of us had seen the military. We'd won World War II. We were the heroes. We were the good guys. And suddenly, in My Lai, Vietnam, our soldiers were implementing Nazi-like atrocities.
Right. Right.
It was really hard to believe. We also had the Pentagon Papers, Watergate, one story after another. These are stories you remember 50 years later. And people had the same set of facts when Walter Cronkite went on the air. Whether you were Republican or Democrat, you generally shared the same factual reality. The press wasn't perfect, but it was a lot of people are doing their job, and there was this shared reality. Now that's completely gone. When we refer to the legacy media, legacy is a word you use for dead people, right? and,
Exactly.
and it's
Yesterday we were talking about Robert Mueller and his legacy.
exactly
That's
so.
really what I call the show. So,
And very few
ugh.
people watch the evening news on one of the three major networks anymore. And Fox has become essentially America's version of Pravda. Now you see the administration's allies have taken over CBS. And what was
Mhm.
once the crown jewel of broadcast journalism is becoming just another a version of Fox again.
Oh
You
yeah, CBS Radio closed shop, and that's 66. I forget what year they started. I mean, it's older than me.
Well, it
Um,
goes back to Edward R. Murrow,
yeah,
and I my
also
my
before 66.
my friend and colleague John Bassler has been broadcasting on them for years. We're continuing to work with them offline. Off
Mm-hmm.
CBS, online, but not on CBS, which is no longer there. But you see the disintegration of the media. CNN is about to go over, be bought out by the Ellisons, which again will put them in Trump's camp. So that's very, very distressing. Um, it leaves MS Now as one of the few critics of the administration. The good news is you see on Substack and elsewhere on YouTube the ascent of a lot of critics, and some of them
Right.
are getting real traction with hundreds of thousands of viewers. And my hope is that that will continue to rise and maybe new uh, institutions will arise out of that. And it's not just going to be a few hundred podcasters.
Well, let's stay on this for a minute because I think that we're onto something. When I brought in Brian Karam, essentially the second guest, I've known Brian's work for a long time. It's one of the only books I brought with me was his book, and you know, this as a journalist that times have changed so extremely. You just so perfectly laid it out that I mean, I think of it like when Peter Jennings died, a whole era of something that I thought was good regular network news, ABC, NBC, ABC, ABC, NBC, and CBS were like the primary channels. PBS NewsHour, and then it went to cable news, right? So the ABC News team eventually was flushed out almost to nothing. Jake Tapper was over there before he went to CNN, and those voices, dissipated. What do you think? Going forward, do you think that there's anything that goes back to that era, or we just basically got to stop reminiscing of those times? And like you mentioned about Substack, we have people now more direct, in touch with those voices. Where do you think those of us who are doing journalism have to focus to get that? Um, I don't want to say just simply integrity, but the respect of the audience for quality news gathering so that the audience, because I'm going to blame everyone who's watching, all of us, including myself, we got what we paid for or didn't pay for is part of my philosophy about news, is that we obviously didn't do enough to protect journalism. Therefore, we have the state of journalism we inherit by our lack of stewardship. Yeah, maybe.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's been fragmenting and becoming atomized for decades now. When I was in high school, we had three channels. Period.
Right.
Uh, then you had 600 stations on cable, and then you had
Right.
the internet with millions, really,
Right.
and
Right.
with social media with tens of millions. So
Right.
it's atomized and evolved or devolved, depending upon your point of view, into all these little silos. But I mean, the good news is, I think you see someone like Jim Acosta leave, I guess, CNN, and now
Hmm.
he's on YouTube, where there's much more freedom, and I think people like that are getting a lot of traction on the internet,
And
and
if you
that's the
had
good
someone
news.
that
And
was,
maybe
yeah,
it'll evolve into real inclusion. But I
and
was
if
just going
you,
to say,
yeah, go for it.
as a reporter, I'm here at home doing Substack, and but as a reporter, you like to have lawyers who vet your material if you're doing the really controversial stuff and you're going to be sued potentially, or you want to have fact checkers, as I did when I was at Vanity Fair, and you had serious professional fact checkers who were there to challenge you before publication.
Right.
And so that is an issue.
Well, as a book researcher for someone else before, and also I'm a published author, but my primary work was, or at least in case of printed journalism, not radio journalism. I'm gonna leave my radio journalism in a different category, but in the print, um, a mistake on my part being just any number of reasons why people make mistake cost both that person and the publishing company resources, whether it be a full-blown lawsuit and a loss or just the time suck. So I always, took an extreme amount of caution in everything I did for every segment I would write, every part that I would assemble. And I grew up in a law firm, so maybe I have an advantage that's just wired in me because of a paralegal mom. But I don't think that when I look at what gets the same shelf space, even with the same publishers, like I have the same publisher as Roger Stone, you know, Skyhorse published my book, Skyhorse published their book, Skyhorse published other bullshit on top of legit shit. And it's a publishing house. I mean, their job is to do that, right? But I feel that we have an audience that really wants us to articulate what makes quality journalism. so that it's really like Occam's razors in a different way. It's just basically bullshit from grain, and I'm obsessed with it. Like I really can't put out a paragraph even in any of my print now that I'm the one running it, and where I look at I'm obsessed with the wording because it's not about whether I get sued, it's whether it's false by just that iota of a word. And don't you think that that's part of what we need to imply to, or implore to our colleagues, and I think back to the audience as well, to demand that?
No, absolutely. I mean, I use when I can afford it. I hire a fact checker on my own sometimes for my Substack post.
Yeah,
But it's I'm trying to make a living as well, and you do the best you can. But if I'm
right,
not sure of something, I don't want to print it.
right. Um, you know, I don't know if we mentioned this when we talked before. I brought his name up a couple times, but Don McClellan was a great war photographer. Oh, actually, I know mentioned with Byron Karam. He was a great war photographer who worked with Sunday Times, and it was Rupert Murdoch who shut him down from going to Falkland Islands to cover what would have probably been his last assignments, because Murdoch said, "I have appliances to sell. War doesn't sell." Um, isn't that kind of what happened to the now what we call legacy media, where even with MS Now, that they are a corporate entity first before they're anything else.
Right. Well, that's always been the case. I think if you go back to the Spanish-American War, it was William
Hmm.
Randolph Hearst who promoted the kind
Sure.
of journalism that fostered the Spanish-American War.
Right.
And as someone who's been an editor in chief, you're very aware uh, that the revenues come largely from advertisers, much more than
Right.
readers. I mean, that's certainly true of print. And you're frequently the publisher will say, "Wait a minute, you can't say something negative about one of our advertisers." So there's always going to be commercial pressures. I mean, that's one of the good things about Substack is I think you are your own publisher in effect,
Mhm.
and that does give it a kind of purity. I mean, the big question to me, as I mentioned earlier, is I'm a little fearful when you get into the ownership, if people like you and me and critics of Trump become too powerful on Substack, will they try to shut us down and pull
Mm.
the rug out from under us? I mean, that's really what happened to Twitter in a way. And I was building I've been sort of shadow banned on Twitter, and it's very frustrating. You build up.
Oh, I understand. I mean, last night I announced that we had Frank Figluzzi on. It had 149 views, not
Exactly.
engagements, just views. But my article about 5 days ago called "Don't Look for the Good," or "Searching for the Good Russian, He's Not Coming to Save You," or whatever the title is. Sorry, I don't know the title of my pieces. I know the content. The title is the last thing I think about typically. Um, that got tens of thousands, like 125,000 views and 1,000 likes. But an announcement that I am going to be doing in broadcast with Frank Figluzzi about Robert Mueller, 8 hours later had 149 views, meaning
Right.
that if they can't even see it, they can't engage it. If they can't engage it, then there's no point in advertising it there. So literally, I find that the platform itself is actually engaged in antitrust operations at its root. So is Facebook, by the way. Same thing's true for Facebook. I've had posts over there that I have friends that I've known my whole life who want to know what I'm doing here. They are not seeing that unless they literally go to my page, where a photo of me in Donetsk, 35 views, love it, love it, love it, and then or likes and engagement. I don't know what the views would be, but the likes and engagements. But the announcement that I'm doing a show, link to Substack, link to YouTube, no engagement
Right.
because it wasn't seen, because the link takes you out of the platform. And so
Right.
Facebook and X are both doing that.
Well, I've been through exactly the same thing on
Right.
Twitter and X, and I had over 50,000 followers, and suddenly I would be getting 678 views and nothing. When I used to get nearly a million if I did particularly clever
Yeah.
tweet. But I did talk to Claude, my AI bot,
Yeah.
and it tells you a bit how to avoid the lie. There really is. It's not our imagination. There is shadow banning built into X's algorithms, and it tells you if you start a conversation with them how to get around that a bit. That is,
Yeah.
you as soon as you post something, you have to go back and retweet it, and the retweet won't be banned in the same way the original was.
Well, I do it a little different way. We have a boosting group, literally people who are dedicated to making sure that it goes out. So same thing for you. I will make sure that when we see your posts that are, you're trying to get a news piece out there, information piece, we just literally went to the people and said, don't gripe about it, take action. And I'm going to do a shameless plug here to say, follow Craig's account, and if you're already following it, subscribe, and if you're already subscribed, it free, throw $5 in. That's the way we do this. I'm in the same boat. I'm an independent journalism guy for a reason. I was at Pacifica Radio. We were community oriented, and I would rather answer to the people than having someone above me saying, "No, no, we're not covering that." I will listen to the people about what to cover, and I listen to people without power about what to cover. That's how I do it here in Ukraine. I don't go to officials and say, "What should I say, hey, Mr. Zelensky? What should I say to the world? Hey, Mr. Umarov, what should I say to the world?" No, I go to people who are like families whose family members are in captivity or occupation or have been through hell, or people who do not have that voice to determine what the voice should be for the pieces we do. And then, of course, we have the policy pieces, but I want to pivot to something I think that you're going to have a lot of thoughts about, and a little bit about what we said with Straits of Hormuz. You know, Reagan, Bush Senior, and Bush Junior, Obama even, and Biden, and we'll add them in there, did not take an aggressive stance with Iran, and they were completely differently successful in the sense that the nuclear policy, freeze that we had under Obama fell completely apart under there. How do you perceive that the Iranians are now going to move forward with Trump? What's your read of their side of it, to the best of your understanding?
Right. Well, I wish I had more of a pipeline into the people of Iran, but I think the administration and most of the American press seems oblivious to the history but of the United States and Iran, and it goes way back. I mean, you have to go back at least to 1953, when the CIA had a coup that toppled the government of Mohammad Mossadegh, who was sort of a secular social democrat, and he had
Right,
one policy that the United States hated, and that
right,
was he wanted to nationalize oil.
right,
And up until then, it was first the Brits more than the Americans, but what is now British BP was British Petroleum, and before that, it was the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company. And the Brits kept 87% of the profits from Iranian oil. The Iranians only got 13%. And that's exactly why Mossadegh wanted to nationalize things, and the CIA, working with the Brits, wouldn't have anything of it. And it was a very sort of a dazzlingly brilliant coup d'état.
hmm
The title of my most recent book is Den of Spies, and that was what the Iranians called the American embassy, and because they knew the coup d'état had been planned in the American embassy.
right,
Uh, and in 1980, of course, Jimmy Carter was running against Ronald Reagan. Uh, uh, Iran had seized 52 American hostages. If Carter was able to get them back before the election, it seemed very, very likely that he would have won re-election. But
hmm
the Republicans made sure that he didn't. And one thing, no one. I write
Wait,
about all.
wait. I want to remind our audience of this. Are you saying that Republicans put winning an election over the security of Americans?
Absolutely.
Oh
And
my
I mean,
God.
this is really a treasonous plot because Iran wanted to release the hostages. And the Republicans, led by Bill Casey, who was Reagan's campaign manager and one of the most dazzlingly brilliant spies in American history. But he, I mean, it really was extraordinary because he was running a presidential campaign in the media spotlight 24/7, but he was still able to dash away to Europe for secret meetings with the Iranian mullahs. And what's interesting that very few people realize is the Republicans were siding with the hardline Iranian Islamic fundamentalists. And the revolution really had two factions. One was those fundamentalists, and the other were sort of secular Democrats on the left.
Right.
Um, and the Republicans sided with the very people we are fighting now, and they've installed this, helped install this horrible regime that's been there for more than 40 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And it leads me to ask you one question about what do you think Democrats lack, or is at least different? I'm going to say it's lack in my perception. So you're free to reform the question on your end. What do they either lack or see so differently that keeps them from being able to deal with such ruthless criminal scumbags?
Well, some of them have been pretty weak in the past, and I have to say, I mean, on the bright side, there are a handful now who I think really are fighting Democrats. I'm thinking of Jamie Raskin, Sheldon Whitehouse, Chris
Yeah.
Murphy has become very tough recently. Robert Garcia is head of the House Oversight Committee, or rather, he's ranking member. I don't know if most Americans realize how weak the minority is in Congress, and the Democrats are in the minority. But the House Oversight Committee was able to subpoena Pam Bondi, and that I mean that's really sort of uh, a real show of strength. Whether they will get her to talk or not is an entirely different question, because I
I
suspect she'll.
saw her last hearing was galling. Um, this is why I would strongly recommend our viewers go buy the cheap $1 flip flops, the really really cheap, spongy ones. Because when you throw them at your big screen TV, I learned this because of Ted Cruz. They just bounce off, and you can do it over and over again without destroying the television.
Right. Well, she does invite, Pam Bondi invites that kind of thing. But I mean, if the Democrats were to really prosecute her, unfortunately, it would end up going back to the Justice Department, and she runs the Justice Department. So it's very hard for the Democrats to do more than that. And that's why it's so important. We have to retake the House and hopefully both houses of Congress. And then they can do serious things. And I mean, impeachment has been a very weak vehicle when they've done it. Obviously, Trump was impeached twice, but he was never convicted by the Senate. And that means the Democrats have to have a strong majority in both houses.
Do you think that there's a weakness in the way Democrats see, or apply their attack plan? I'm trying to think of what I would call it because there's several different types of problems that it all runs into. Um, that I mean, how do I want to say this? Like when I talk to Republicans one to one, I can usually prevail in the argument by getting into their Maslow's hierarchy of needs pretty easily. I start doing Socratic method to go, okay, but don't you believe this? Yeah. And so don't you see this? Yeah. And I don't do it from my side. I try to figure out their end of Maslow's. I already know mine. And then eventually, usually that person, if I and it's a one to one problem, I don't have a 1 to 1,000, 1 to 1,000,000 ratio on this, but I can usually get 1 to 1. I can get them to come to essentially a nonpartisan worldview, and then start talking about where to go forward. Do you think that there's something in the Democratic Party or the Democratic leadership, or maybe even the population that so identifies as Democrat, that maybe needs to do that more? Or because I think it's more than midterms issue. I think midterms is too late. Tomorrow is upon us, or today is upon us. You know what I mean? We have a
Right.
lot to do besides just voting that gets us there.
Yeah, I do not have an easy answer to this problem. And when I started writing, it was just, I've been doing it for more than 50 years. But I
Yeah.
thought a really logical, well argued, well documented article could change people's minds. And the truth is, you realize, with my books, if it's a big success, I'm lucky to sell three or 400,000 copies would be a big hit, but they're not being bought by Republicans, and they, and it's very hard to cross the aisle in that way. And maybe you can do it one on one, but I live in the I when I lived in Brooklyn, and I looked at the voting records after the 2020 election, and my neighborhood was 98-2 for Biden. So there was not many people for me to convince.
Well, one of our viewers here said, Renee says, there's a lot of comments from you guys reading on the screen here, but I will use Renee's as one. Seems to me that Dems' weakness stems from the top. Schumer, Jeffries, and some of these posers like Fetterman, et cetera, are beholden to big donors like APAC, et cetera, and are under duress. So, regardless of which group I name, um, the amount of money that operates in the DNC as well is pretty massive, and thus because it's massive, there's going to be chiefs and there's going to be gatekeepers, and their job is to, make sure that the frick frack is left out. So Bernie's not allowed in unless they can find a way to use him, and I think that some of that's money. The big donors, the quiet big donors, etc.
Absolutely. I would agree with Renee. And I think APAC is a real problem. And she mentions Schumer, and I agree, he's a problem. He was a classmate of mine in college, by the way. But,
Oh, wow, interesting.
um, but I wish he were stronger. What can I say? I mean, it's, and I think there is a bit of a new generation coming in. I think obviously AOC is tougher. There are, I was glad to see Robert Garcia, who I really didn't know much about, being tough on the oversight committee. I think the strongest Democrats were in recent years was when they did the January 6th hearings, and you had Jamie Raskin and Lynn
On fire.
Cheney, and now then they were really doing it. But it has to be a spectacle. And I remember just after I got out of college, there was Watergate, and you had the Watergate hearings were on every afternoon, and this was the beginning of binge watching. It wasn't it was a real a
Four to
lot.
5 year old me was doing that. My mom thought it was odd. She told everyone, "Well, Chris has always been an odd kid. He used to watch, like the Watergate hearings. He watched what? Yeah, I don't know if he understood it, and I didn't obviously understand, except for that the government was on trial. That's the way I remember it. The government, and actually, that's how I said it as a child. Apparently, that the government was on trial.
Right, and the hearings were strong enough that a lot of key Republicans defected. Barry Goldwater was led a contingent of Republicans to the White House and told Nixon he had to resign. Today, we've had very, very few defections. And I remember I was wrong, of course. I remember Lynn Cheney defected. I thought she would be the first of many, but no, she wasn't. And you have a few people who are little odd ducks. I guess Rand Paul, Massey is doing some stuff on the oversight committee. But one thing I think that's important is the Epstein issue has become enormously important in the sense that it's a fissure in the Republican Party, because the Republicans were saying in the last election that you have to get behind the victims. We have to get to the bottom of the Epstein thing. And when you look at MAGA, one of the original memes that brought them all together was the idea that there were global a global elite of pedophiles who were having sex in a pizza parlor in the basement of a pizza parlor in Washington D.C., the Comet Pizza, and Comet Pizza, as it turned out, did not have a basement. And even if it did, it's hard to
They
visualize.
actually have good pizza, and the hard part with Comet Ping Pong is when you go to the bathroom, the wall is recessed. You have to figure out where the door is, but it's good pizza, by the way. I went there,
Right,
and
but even
yeah.
if it had a basement, it's hard to visualize, at least for me, Hillary Clinton having sex with 8 girls or whatever the hell they were doing. But when you look at the original meme, it was that there was a global elite of pedophiles. And what is the Epstein scandal about?
Yeah. Now that we see that there actually is a global elite, including Donald Trump and his associates, engaged in exactly what QAnon said was happening. I mean, Frank said this last night. Who would have thought it had some truth to it? It was more projection than it was far-fetched reality. There was something in it.
Right. So, I mean, I think we have to pursue that as much as possible because you end up people having, obviously Marjorie Taylor Greene defected, Joe Rogan, the podcaster, is a huge
He just said that
following.
he
He
said
is
Hillary
defected.
Clinton is more of MAGA than MAGA than Trump. He just said that like a day and a half ago. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Ugh. You have a book,
So,
everyone I know here. It follows American Compromise, and I've seen it mentioned more than enough in here, so I'm gonna have to pivot to it because that's what we're talking about. Um, Now that it's pretty clear that not only that there's a lot of files implicating Trump, but there was a lot of files destroyed, and there's only one guy he never criticizes. Um, how do you feel about your own book being out there? Like you're the author, that's your baby. I get it. I'm an author, but the more it's out there, the more this happens. I mean,
uh, well, I'm proud of it. I did 2 books on Trump and Russia, really, and one
yeah,
was
House of
House
Cards.
of Trump, House of Putin, and the
Yeah,
other, there's American
yeah.
Compromise. And I remember writing it, wondering, gee, I wonder what it'll seem like 10 years from now.
Right.
And but I had no vision of Trump coming back into power at all. And I think it's the truth is I've done 6 books in what I think of as a series. I have a different publishers, but it goes back to the days of 9/11 when I wrote House of Bush, House of Saud.
Right,
And in
right.
each of these 6 books, you see the erosion of our checks and balances, of our accountability mechanisms. And some of them are rather obscure, some are pretty obvious. I mean, things, obviously, I think social media has to be regulated. And in Silicon Valley, you now have the rise of this oligarchy. 10 years ago, people mostly thought of Silicon Valley as a bunch of liberals or libertarians or so forth, people who were doing really well and making a lot of money, but they were not thought of as conservatives at all. And right now, it's kind of horrifying to see what has happened to them. And
Hmm.
I think if you go into other areas like real estate, it is so easy to launder money through real estate. It is ridiculous. And it is how Trump got into power. He was a lousy, lousy businessman. People forget that. They think he was rich and successful, but he was bailed out as early as the early 80s by the Russian mafia. In 1984, David Bogatin was a member of the
Right.
Russian mafia, according to FBI files. He walked into Trump Tower. He had $6 million in cash. If you adjust for inflation, that's somewhere between 20 and 30 million today. It's a lot of money. And he said, "Oh, I'll take 5 condos, sight unseen." And that was the beginning. In the end, I found at least 13 members of the Russian mafia who were
Hmm.
either living in Trump Tower or bought condos there. And it's hard for Americans to take into it. My God, that is such a breach of national security. The Russian mafia is an arm of Russian intelligence.
Right.
And yet we're living in the home base, the crown jewel of the president of the United States. What the fuck is going on here? Why isn't it
Yeah.
being taken?
Well, like this guy Mangashev in Florida, who was a former FSB guy, and anyone who knows what FSB salaries are, you shouldn't be able to have an office in Trump Tower, an office at a building that's like under a kilometer to the south of A1A, and another one at the north of A1A. Like on that income, where do you get the money? It made no sense until you move him to another category, to I don't know, Russian intelligence, when then you have the state apparatus, But Sunny Isles, did you ever go down to Sunny Isles and take a look around at his southern properties and how it looks down there? Because New York was one of them, but when I
You
went to Sunny Isles, I mean, my girlfriend at the time, she goes, "You're gonna trip out. Just let's
know,
go." And we got on. Hey, one day drove down. I went, "Yeah, just yeah, lots of Russians."
well, I've never been there personally. I did visit it online, and I
Yeah,
looked at the menu in the restaurant downstairs, and it was
right.
all Russian, and I think that that tells you exactly what you need to know.
Yeah. So one big thing I want to talk about in your constructs of your book, because I think this is important. You said there were erosions of checks and balances. What do you think our viewers should think about when it comes to, like you said, there are some that are obscure. Were there any of those that you think, man, I wish we had understood that better now, because that's so obscure, most people would not understand that that matters. And then you go all the way up to, we could both say all the way up to like Supreme Court, or the big obvious ones in the Constitution. What are some of the ones you think stand out now that
Well,
we've gotten to this point?
for the r- real near term, immediate future, I think the crisis is social media and artificial intelligence. And
Hmm.
what you begin to realize, I mean, I think all of us are on the internet pretty much constantly. I mean, but when you Google or use your, I use Claude from Anthropic as my AI thing, you realize what that's being programmed somewhere, right?
Hmm.
And it's being programmed in a certain way, just as Elon Musk's X is being programmed to
Hmm.
shadow ban you and me and anyone who writes critically of Trump. And that can
Right.
also be done with AI or something. But there's absolutely no regulations in place. So, this recent tiff between Anthropic and Pete Hegseth is really, really interesting and is quite horrifying when you think about it. That may be that sort of overarching. I mean, it sort of subsumes almost everything else. But another thing I want to get at, which is related to all this, is
Hmm.
I talked a lot about laundering money through real
Hmm.
estate and how easy it is. Once you start doing that, you get into the offshore world. And if you look at the
Right.
world of offshore money, it's a world, I've seen
Like
estimates as high
Bank of
as
Cyprus is
60.
an example.
Yeah, there's Cyprus, there's the Cayman Islands, Panama, and all that. Um,
Right, right, right.
but you're talking about a world with an economy of as high as $60 trillion. That's an entity that's about twice as big as the economy of the United States.
Mm,
It's a stateless kleptocracy. It is non sovereign, but it's a powerful geopolitical force. And two of the most powerful people in it are Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump. And Jeffrey Epstein was a big player in that world. And now the most powerful, the biggest launderer of money into that world is the United States of America. And there are outposts like South Dakota, which has rules. And I'm about to take a deep dive into that world and see
yeah.
the laws there that allow the easy transfer of money.
Did you catch this post or this news that broke this last week about lawsuits against Meta and putting children at vulnerability of inappropriate content that they were viewing, etc. and a successful lawsuit, nonetheless.
I've heard of it vaguely. I don't have any special
Yeah.
information on
Well,
that.
I think one thing that comes out of that, and I've actually been proposing that class action lawsuits against Meta and X about antitrust would be a good path. And it's not because it yields the verdict we want. What it will do is yield discovery, where we can use discovery to put out what they do, what they know, and what they know they can do. And I'll pay honor to Ralph Nader for the Corvair as being an example. Like, you mean you can put a seatbelt in? Yeah, but you won't? Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, essentially, just asking the question sometimes in a certain way generates a response. And I think that by showing people that a platform, like let's say even Substack, if I put a link to a YouTube post and Substack says, no, we're not letting you do that, only Substack links. Okay, that's antitrust behavior. Again, would I succeed in court? Maybe not. Would I succeed in the public court, though? Probably so. And I think that that's where we really have to see more people take action. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think we do need lawsuits like that, and I
Yeah.
mean, part of the problem is the courts are so slow, and it's also you need control of Congress to get national laws passed, and even the
And
Democrats
state
have been,
houses.
lo-
Oh, fucking state
yeah.
houses are where we're really screwed. Absolutely.
They also get even the Democrats get contributions from Silicon Valley, and
Yeah.
they have to be able to fight all that. I mean, and obviously one of the huge problems that has been Citizens United, and I mean, and we got to get I mean, I'm not going to hold my breath, but we really need to take the Supreme Court back.
Well, let me ask you in a reverse question because I've talked about Citizens United and the Heller gun decisions as areas for Democrats to learn lessons. This is why I love being an independent. Then I can think without a tribal hat on. If we were to say, and same thing with fairness doctrine would apply in this. Justice Scalia said some things in the Heller decision about handguns in D.C. that essentially were cues to the liberals, and the Democrats or progressives about how to gain gun control that would be constitutional. I mean, he said it in the decision. If you go read the decision actually and not watch your hair be on fire, you can say, oh, he actually gave us a path towards change if we actually read it. And I think the reason why I'm bringing this up is sometimes not listening to our opponents, people we have learned to despise for whatever reason or disdain. We lose opportunities to gain something. So back to Citizens United, if we were to say, okay, look, we're not going to get a Supreme Court who says corporations are not people, then why isn't there a democratic equivalent of this that's doing the good deed for good people? And similar would be in the state houses, ALEC, ALEC. Um, I literally could never remember the name of the Democratic equivalent. And when I was on the phone with a staffer from a former representative who's no longer in this world, I said, "Well, what's the name of the one for the Democrats?" "Oh, well, we have one too." "Well, what's the name?" Um, and I went, "That's the fucking answer right there." What's the name of the Republican one? ALAC. What's the name of the Democratic one? Well, we have one. And my point is, like, if we're not going to be ruthless, we're losing, you know? And that includes the ways in which the system that we bitch about has to be used as the system we actually have, broken as it is. What do you think?
No, well, I think you're absolutely right. But unfortunately, those Republican institutions are fueled by money from huge corporations and from Russia and elsewhere. And there have been so many loopholes and workarounds. I mean, Leonard Blavatnik, for
Oh,
example,
yeah.
is a oligarch, but he has dual nationality. So he's an American citizen and a multi billionaire, and he can give tens of millions to the Republican senatorial campaign committee.
Hmm.
I don't know anyone like that on the Democratic side.
Right.
And of course, you've always had big oil and so forth. contributing to the Republican part coffers.
Yeah. Well, and I'm very personally, I'm very thankful for your experience. I love talking to you because I think we share a certain view of the world, but sometimes just different experience levels and experience lives. And there's a way in which your particular body of work addresses things I've been paying attention to my whole life. I mean, I watched the Reagan era with a very specific set of lenses. I went right after Dick Cheney running Cheney Watch, and your books are like literally not the books I didn't write, but I identify with so easily, and I think our viewers the same way. I certainly feel like our viewers do this. I love watching people on Substack compliment your work and what it does for them. By the way, how does
No,
that
well,
feel to you? Have these people directly in there telling you what they think of your work?
no, well, I appreciate it enormously, and it's also, um, I have very mixed feelings, but I'm thrilled these books are still relevant, but I'm horrified that they're necessary.
My neighbors used to say, I can't wait to see you on TV again. Or, sorry, I didn't see you on TV. I can't wait. No, man, I'm on TV when people get murdered. Please. You want me not on television. You want to see me walking down the street with a guitar on my back at the cafe playing jazz. If I'm on television, someone just got murdered. I was a counterterrorism guy, so I didn't. You don't want to see me on television. It's never good news. Similarly, books. It would be good to write a good news book, and you write complicated stories about bad people doing bad things for clarity. What is the key payoff that you want from your books for the population? What do you want them to walk away with?
Well, I would love to get Trump out of there, and I see my brother just joined on our.
Awesome. Hi, Jimmy.
um, I what is it? What is the question again? The
Yeah, yeah. If you said here's the payoff I would like people to be able to take away from any of my books, what would you like to see it have an effect on their understanding and their potency as citizens and voters and humans?
Well, I want the rest of America to wake up essentially, and that and that means demonstrating on next Saturday. We have no King's Day coming up in just 2 days, and I'd like to see more than 10 million people out in the streets. I'd like people all over the country, not just in the liberal areas I happen to live in, but you know, I mean, I'd love to be able to reach out into the rest of the country where it makes a difference, into the swing states and so
Right.
forth. There's so much that needs to be done if this country is to be genuinely democratic, and we're not right now.
We're not, and I'm going to say, first of all, I've seen people say thank you to us, and I think that I speak with you to say no, thank you to everyone who's watching. We would be very weird people talking on cameras together, and we're very strange people anyway. I'm sure. I'll speak for myself. I'm a strange person, but having all of you here trying to trying to join us in this understanding together is really what this is about. So likewise, for everyone saying thank you to us, I say thank you right back to everyone who's been joining not just this broadcast but the other ones. And we're going to do as many of these as you want to do, and we have at least until midterms. We have a lot to cover, and it keeps. Craig, is it me or is it just like literally every day is the chaos machine? It's not just a little bit. It's like every few hours is a new chaos machine wave.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it really is. And I was just thinking, if you'll excuse one last plug on my part,
You got as much as you want, man. Plug as much as you want, bro.
my Substack, I have something I call the Trump Russia timeline. And
Hmm.
if you haven't read my books, it sort of synthesizes that I'm doing it one post at a time. I've done 37 of them so far.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And it's sequentially, you see how the Russians helped put Trump into power. And
Hmm.
for me, growing up as a young kid in Dallas, the first movie that really thrilled me that I remember was The Manchurian Candidate. And it was sort of the epitome of Cold War paranoia and the
Yeah.
idea that Russians and communists would take over the White House was absolutely just petrifying and seemed so otherworldly. And yet now, think about it, we have an asset of Russian intelligence who is president of the United States. And this is the story
Precisely.
that happened. And I think it's too big. You know, it's very odd. My books have been published by every major publisher, Simon and Schuster, HarperCollins, which is owned by Rupert Murdoch, and so forth, Penguin Random. But they've been vetted by lawyers. No one has questioned a single fact in my books, to my knowledge. At least hasn't gotten back to me. And yet the message has not gotten through to the rest of the country. And that's what I'd like people who are listening to do, to help go out there into areas where we're not just preaching to the choir and to convert people. Because the
Yeah.
facts are on our side.
Well, and I would say I have a reason for going on Substack, and it had a lot to do with an evolution from Twitter Spaces, where I was getting frustrated with Americans. As a person, I've been in war here now for 1,440 something days, 1,442 days for me, whatever. Add 46 to that for the country itself. And I don't deal with the pleading for help tone anymore. I just don't deal with it very well. I feel angry at it sometimes, and then I have to back off a little bit, like, okay, well, look, I mean, how would I feel if I was there? And I would rather empower that voice. I would rather empower the people who are in that state. So I do this entirely for that purpose. I do this so that from 10,000 miles away, I'm still an American. Tonight, I was told I was very Ukrainian, and I think that's also very true because I've been here a while. So I'm very Ukrainian at this point, and I have some wisdom to bring because of Ukraine. Where, like, when you say no kings, and my brain goes, oh, so is it like one day and then everyone goes back home, and then maybe a few weeks it's another day? Because in November 2013 here, protests, the Revolution of Dignity began in November 2013, and they continued and they kept growing more and more intense. And Yanukovych was getting pissed off at this idea that these kids just wouldn't go home, and then citizens just wouldn't go home. So he killed these people. He killed those who came out. And if people don't understand that it didn't come in a few days and go home, come in a few days and go home, this is what makes it frustrating from this side. But instead of griping about it, I just want to kind of take the time, like we're doing tonight, where we put the issues on the table, flesh through them a little bit, but then also walk away with a little bit of a what to think differently tomorrow that I didn't think of today as a citizen. And if for a final word on this, what would you say you learned after all of your years of doing the work you do as a journalist and the work you've done in a book, but as a citizen, where are you, Craig, the citizen in 2026, that 20-year-old Craig could not have fucking conceived of?
Well, I mean, the problem is when I was 20, I was reading about the My Lai massacre, and I thought, what?
No, so you were
Going to
already
do that in
involved.
other parts of the world. Now I think, gee, I'm doing it, but it's not having the impact I'd like it to have.
Sure.
I did have one last thing I see on the live chat.
Do as much as you want, right?
A woman named, I guess, Jill Cody writes, chaos is intentional. The more confused we are, the more
Yes.
paralyzed we'll be. And she is absolutely right. And
Right.
one of the things I write about in House of Trump, House of Putin is the way all this started. I mean, this is a Russian thing. One of Trump, Putin was approached by General Gerasimov. I forget what year it was, but he was told, listen, our military sucks. But
Yeah.
the good news is we have something called hybrid warfare, and we're going to confuse the hell out of the opposition.
Right.
And Putin had a man named Vladislav Surkov.
Yeah.
Who,
I have all of his emails, by the way.
Right. Who was telling, who was sort of creating fake realities, multiple fake realities. And the idea was confuse everyone so they didn't know what the hell was going on. And they decided it was so successful in Russia, they wanted to do it in the United States. And if you go back to 2016 and you see the Russian bots get into our media ecosystem, doing lie after lie after lie, some of which are plausible, some of which were idiotic. But the idea was to flood the zone with different kinds of lies,
Right.
with multiple realities, so that no one would know what the fuck is going on.
Well, the phrase I use is cognitive warfare for this. So the difference between propaganda and cognitive warfare. So propaganda is specifically designed for a behavior nudge modification. You know, a general or a president says, "Well, look, we don't want guys in Iraq to pick up their arms and fight when we come to take out Saddam. So we're going to drop flyers. They're going to say, hey, look, this is not your fight. Stay home. By the way, this is a real model. This is how we did the psyop work." And psychological operations develop a product called propaganda in order to effectuate that psychological objective, or PO or PO. And then cognitive warfare, though, is like what I think of as intelligence DDoS attack. It's just meant to shut the nerves down, shut the intake down, and that is a really big thing that people are not catching. And I think that the Epstein files have a quality of both. It's information that we want to know about what's happened, and I think should know. And I think people who are really good investigators have been doing a good job. But the public at large trying to do it, it's cognitive warfare again. It's just too much information, too many rabbit holes to run down. And you mentioned the Russian model. By the way, I really do. I wasn't joking with everyone. I really do have the Surkov emails. I have 4 gigabytes of those. I'm actually working on 2 more trenches for this summer
Wow.
because I'm pulling apart everything he did. Um, and I want to go back even further, though. The Ivan Agians, who created the Active Measures Department, he literally said, if America did not have freedom of speech, we'd make it for them, because they understood that state propaganda is very narrow. It has a official narrative, and then everything else that's not that is condemned. But in America, we're the exact opposite, and it's our wiring. And they knew this about us, that they could float anything into the bullshit space, and there's going to be a section of our population that just eats it up, spreads it around, and next thing you know, Dr. Pepper's no longer going to be on the shelf. What? Yeah, yeah, here's a post. I mean, this is actually a post that happened about 15 years ago. Like, Dr. Pepper won't be around anymore? That's not a thing. But how long before people passed it around before someone says it's not a thing? That's what he was aiming at, that type of, chaos in our news sphere. And they're masters at Yuri Bezmenov uses the example party pretty well. The change of society that the Russian active measures, uh, the demoralization and the reconstruction under the new paradigm. All of these things are happening to America, and Russia's doing it to us. China's doing it to us, but more importantly, and the beauty of their model is we're doing it to ourselves. They don't have to do much. The rest we do ourselves. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, brother, you're awesome. I think
Well,
that I think it's great to have you over here. I'm so glad that you come on to talk to our friends, and to everyone here. If you're not a paid subscriber, consider it.
yeah.
And also for Craig, not just me. I'm just joking. No, for Craig's work, make sure you're subscribed, not just follow. And if you are a subscriber, do the $5 thing if you can't do more. Do that because, like we were saying about independent journalism and independent media, if you don't participate in it in some way, it goes away. And I'm very thankful that you're here with all of us. A deep appreciation of you as a person, number one, and you as a journalist and author as well. So thank you, my bro.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
All right, see you soon. And to everyone, this interview will be available for you, and share it with your friends. And we will see you tomorrow with Sean Penner to talk about our situation in Ukraine. And Craig, pay attention to his post as well, and we'll catch up with you. God bless everyone. Slava Ukraini, Heroям Slava, і пиздець Російської Федерації.